The trust documents felt heavy in my hands as I sat alone in Robert's old study, the late afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the antique desk where my husband had spent countless hours managing our family's assets. 20 years of building a fortune together, and now I was the sole guardian of a legacy that had fractured our family in ways I never could have imagined. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent decades as the supportive wife behind the successful man, only to emerge as the unexpected power broker in our family's most critical hour. Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell? My assistant Sandra's voice came through the intercom, pulling me from my thoughts. Your 3 o'clock is here. Thank you, Sandra. Give me 2 minutes, please. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I closed the leather portfolio containing the trust documents and took a deep breath, my fingers absently twisting the wedding band I still wore 2 years after Robert's death. Today wasn't about reminiscing, it was about business. And if there was one thing Robert had taught me during our 38 years of marriage, it was that emotion had no place in business decisions. My 3 o'clock appointment was with Charles Whitmore, my son Andrew's attorney, the third one he'd sent in as many months, each more aggressive than the last, each leaving with the same answer. I straightened my Chanel blazer, a gift from Robert on our last anniversary, and composed my features into the pleasant but firm expression I'd perfected during decades of charity galas and board meetings. The mask of a woman who would not be swayed by intimidation. Send him in, I instructed, rising to my full height of 5'4", my posture impeccable despite my 63 years. Charles Whitmore strode into the study like he owned it, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. At 40-something, he was younger than the previous attorneys, with the hungry look of a man with something to prove. I recognized the type immediately. Robert had hired and fired dozens of them over the years. Mrs. Mitchell, he extended his hand, his voice carrying that particular condescension reserved for women of a certain age. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I shook his hand firmly, gesturing to the chair across from me. Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're here regarding my son's situation. He placed his briefcase on the edge of the desk and clicked it open. I'll be direct. Mrs. Mitchell, your grandson Jacob's medical treatments are becoming increasingly expensive, and the insurance only covers a portion. Your son Andrew is struggling financially, especially with Emma's college tuition due next semester. I nodded, my face betraying nothing. I'm well aware of my grandchildren's circumstances, Mr. Whitmore. Then surely you understand why the terms of the trust need to be revisited, he continued, sliding a document toward me. I've prepared a petition for early distribution of funds, specifically earmarked for Jacob's medical expenses and Emma's education. I didn't touch the document, instead folding my hands neatly on the desk. Mr. Whitmore, I've already explained to the previous 2 attorneys that the terms of the trust are explicitly clear. Distribution of capital begins when the grandchildren turn 25, with provisions for education and medical expenses to be dispersed at the trustee's discretion. My discretion. With all due respect, Mrs. Mitchell, your grandson's health is of great concern to me, I interrupted, my voice calm but firm, which is why I've been paying his medical bills directly to the hospital for the past year. The same applies to Emma's tuition, which has been arranged with the university's financial office. His eyebrows rose slightly. Andrew wasn't aware. My son hasn't been aware of many things since his father died, Mr. Whitmore. I opened a folder on my desk and slid across copies of receipts and bank transfers, including the fact that I've been protecting his children from his financial mismanagement. Whitmore scanned the documents, his practiced confidence faltering. I see, but Andrew is still their father, and he should have some say in how the money is spent? I finished for him, allowing a touch of steel to enter my voice. The same money he attempted to access through 3 separate fraudulent schemes in the past 18 months? The same money he's desperate for because his gambling debts have finally caught up with him? The attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not privy to— No, you're not. But I am. I reached for another folder and placed several photographs on the desk. These were taken last week at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. My son seems to have developed quite a relationship with the high-stakes poker tables. Whitmore's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he looked at the surveillance photos. Andrew hunched over a poker table, surrounded by empty glasses, his face locked in the desperate concentration of a man betting money he didn't have. My husband built this family's fortune from nothing, Mr. Whitmore. He created this trust to protect our legacy and provide for future generations, not to fund my son's self-destruction. I gathered the photos and slipped them back into the folder. Now, if you'd like to discuss how we can better structure the direct payments for Jacob's medical needs or Emma's educational expenses, I'm all ears. Otherwise, this meeting is concluded. He studied me for a long moment, reassessing. I recognized that look too. The gradual realization that the seemingly traditional widow across from him was not the pushover he'd anticipated. I'll need to consult with my client, he finally said, collecting his documents and closing his briefcase. Of course. I rose, signaling the end of our meeting. Please extend my love to my grandchildren when you speak with Andrew, and remind him that they're always welcome to visit their grandmother. My door is always open to them, even if their father chose to close his to me. After Whitmore left, I allowed myself a moment of weakness, sinking back into the leather chair that still smelled faintly of Robert's cologne. 2 years had passed since the cancer took him. 2 years since our son had transformed from a loving family man into someone I barely recognized. The trust fund that Robert had established to protect our family had instead become the wedge driving us apart. My phone buzzed with a text message from Emma, my 17-year-old granddaughter. Hi, Grandma. Any chance we could talk tonight? Need some advice. Don't tell Dad I asked. I smiled despite the weight on my heart. At least some connections remained unbroken. I quickly texted back. Of course, darling. 8 p.m., our usual number. Standing at the window overlooking the manicured gardens Robert had been so proud of, I watched Charles Whitmore's Mercedes pull away from the estate. He was undoubtedly already on the phone with Andrew, strategizing their next move. They didn't realize yet that I was always 3 steps ahead, another lesson from Robert, who'd built an investment empire by anticipating market shifts before they happened. Sandra, I called through the intercom, please ask Martin to bring the car around. I need to make a visit. 30 minutes later, I was pulling up to the modern glass building housing McAllister and Partners, the investment firm Robert had founded, and where I now held a controlling interest. The security guard nodded respectfully as I crossed the lobby, employees offering polite greetings as I made my way to the executive floor. Most still saw me as Robert's widow, not the majority shareholder who reviewed their quarterly reports with a fine-tooth comb. Patricia McAllister, Robert's longtime partner and now CEO, was waiting in her office. At 58, she was one of the few people who knew exactly who I was, beyond the carefully cultivated image of the supportive wife. Eleanor, she greeted me warmly, embracing me briefly before gesturing to her sitting area. I take it the meeting with Andrew's latest attorney went as expected. They're getting younger, I said, settling onto the sofa. And marginally more creative. This one came prepared with hospital bills and tuition statements, as if I wouldn't already know every detail. Patricia poured us both a finger of the Macallan 18 that Robert had gotten her hooked on during late nights closing deals. And Andrew still has no idea you're directly covering Jacob's treatments? None. He's too busy trying to dig himself out of his gambling debts to notice the bills are being paid. I accepted the glass, taking a small sip. I had Henderson follow him to Vegas again last weekend. He lost another $90,000. Christ, Patricia muttered. What happened to him, Ellie? He was never like this when Robert was alive. The question hit a tender spot, one I'd been prodding at for 2 years without finding an answer that satisfied me. I don't know. After the funeral, it was like something broke in him. He stopped returning my calls, moved the family across town, and started living like the money was already his. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. The first time he showed up at the house after Robert's death, it wasn't to check on me. It was to ask about the will. Robert would be heartbroken, Patricia said quietly. Robert isn't here, I replied, more sharply than I intended. And now I'm the villain for enforcing the trust he established. Patricia studied me with the same shrewd gaze that had made her a formidable business partner to my husband. What's your endgame here, Ellie? You can't keep playing this shadow game forever. Jacob needs stability for his treatment, and Emma's starting college in the fall. I'm protecting them the only way Andrew will allow, from a distance. I placed my glass on the table, leaning forward. But things are going to change soon. That's actually why I'm here. I pulled out the leather portfolio containing the trust documents and opened it to a specific page, pointing to a clause that Patricia hadn't seen before. Robert added this provision 6 months before he died, I explained. It gives me the authority to remove Andrew as a beneficiary entirely if I can prove financial misconduct or addiction issues that might endanger the trust's assets. Patricia's eyes widened as she read the clause. You're going to cut him out? I'm going to protect my grandchildren, I corrected. Andrew has already burned through his personal inheritance. The only reason he hasn't touched the trust is because he can't yet, but Emma turns 18 next month, which triggers certain provisions. And you think he'll try to influence her decisions regarding her portion of the trust? Patricia finished, understanding immediately. I know he will. He's already mentioned her helping out the family once she has access to her education funds. My jaw tightened at the memory of that overheard phone call. She's a good girl who loves her father, despite everything. She'll try to help him if he asks. Patricia handed the documents back to me. What do you need from me? The board meets next week to review the quarterly performance of the trust's investments. I want to propose a restructuring. Create a separate medical trust for Jacob that can only be accessed for his health care, and establish a direct payment arrangement with Emma's university that can't be diverted. Andrew will fight this. Patricia warned. He'll claim you're overstepping your authority as trustee. Let him. My voice was calm, but I felt the same steely resolve that had seen me through Robert's long illness and the lonely aftermath. I've spent 2 years watching my son destroy himself and risk his children's future. I'm done being the passive observer. Patricia leaned back, a small smile playing at her lips. You know, most of the board still thinks of you as Robert's quiet wife who sits in on meetings out of sentimentality. They have no idea who they're really dealing with. Let's keep it that way, I said, allowing myself a small smile in return. It's always an advantage when people underestimate you. After finalizing the details of our proposal for the board meeting, I left Patricia's office feeling more confident than I had in months. The weight of the decisions I was making wasn't lost on me. I was potentially severing what little relationship remained with my only child. But Robert had entrusted me with his legacy for a reason, and I wouldn't fail him or my grandchildren. My driver Martin was waiting with the car when I emerged from the building. Home, Mrs. Mitchell? No, I said, checking my watch. Take me to Westfield Academy, please. I want to be there when Emma finishes her debate practice. As we drove through the city, I thought about the first time I'd met Robert, fresh out of business school with big dreams and an unwavering confidence that had both irritated and attracted me. Back then, I'd been working as an assistant at an investment firm, one of the few women in the office not relegated to secretarial duties. Robert had been a junior analyst, brilliant but lacking the family connections that fast-tracked careers. In finance, we'll build something together, he'd promised on our third date, outlining his vision for what would become McAllister and Partners, something that will last generations. And we had. For 38 years, we'd been partners in every sense. I'd supported his ambitions, offered insight when asked, and gradually taken on a more significant role as the firm grew from a small startup to a respected investment house. Most people saw only Robert's success, unaware of the countless nights we'd spent at our dining room table, analyzing market trends and refining strategies. Andrew had grown up watching this partnership, though I now wondered how much he'd actually understood. Had he seen only the results? The beautiful home, the prestigious schools, the comfortable lifestyle, without grasping the work and principles behind them? Had Robert and I somehow failed to instill in him the values that had guided our own lives? Martin pulled up to the wrought iron gates of Westfield Academy, where both Emma and Jacob had been students before Andrew moved them to a public school closer to their new home. Another decision made without consulting me, supposedly for convenience, but really to assert his independence from the family legacy. Emma was sitting on a bench near the entrance, her dark hair, so like her grandfather's, pulled back in a neat ponytail, her school uniform slightly rumpled after a long day. When she spotted my car, her face lit up with a smile that momentarily erased the worries etched between her brows. "Grandma!" she exclaimed as I stepped out of the car. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said, embracing her. She'd grown taller in the months since I'd last seen her in person, our relationship maintained largely through texts and weekly phone calls that Andrew didn't know about. "Thought I might treat my favorite debater to dinner," she hesitated, glancing at her phone. "Dad's expecting me home." "I'll have you home by 7, I promised. "Or I can call him if you prefer." "No," she said quickly, too quickly. "That's okay. Dinner sounds great." As we settled into a quiet corner table at Carmichael's, Robert's favorite restaurant where the staff still greeted me by name, I studied my granddaughter carefully. Emma had always been poised beyond her years, but there was a new tension in her shoulders, a wariness that shouldn't be present in a 17-year-old. "How's your brother doing?" I asked after we'd ordered. "Better this week. The new medication seems to be helping with the pain." She fiddled with her water glass. "Dad says we might have to switch doctors again, though. Something about insurance networks." I made a mental note to call Jacob's specialist myself. "And how about you? Excited about NYU in the fall?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Actually, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. Dad's been saying maybe I should consider somewhere closer to home, or maybe even community college for a year or two, just to save money until things stabilize." The careful control I'd maintained all day threatened to crack. Andrew knew perfectly well that Emma's education was fully funded through the trust. This was manipulation, pure and simple, keeping her close to use as leverage. "Emma," I said gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Your grandfather and I established your college fund the day you were born. NYU is paid for. Tuition, housing, expenses, all of it. There's no need to compromise on your education." She bit her lip, looking so much like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap for stories that my heart ached. "Dad says we need to be practical right now, with Jacob's medical bills and everything." "Jacob's medical care is also taken care of," I assured her. "Your grandfather made certain provisions for both of you." "Then why does Dad keep saying we're struggling?" The question burst from her with a frustration that suggested it had been building for some time. "He sold Mom's car last month, and he's talking about moving us to an apartment because the house is too expensive to maintain." I chose my next words carefully. Emma adored her father, despite his flaws, and I wouldn't be the one to shatter that relationship. "Your father is going through a difficult time adjusting to life without your grandfather. Sometimes grief manifests in unexpected ways." "It's been 2 years, Grandma." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And it's getting worse, not better." Last weekend, he was gone the entire time. Wouldn't answer his phone. Jacob had a bad episode and I couldn't reach Dad, so I had to call an ambulance myself. My grip tightened on her hand. Why didn't you call me? Dad made us promise not to bother you with our problems. He says you've got your hands full managing Grandpa's estate. She met my eyes directly, her gaze unflinching in a way that reminded me of Robert. But that's not true, is it? There's something else going on. In that moment, I had to make a choice. Continue shielding her from the ugly truth or treat her with the respect her maturity deserved. I thought about what Robert would advise, and I knew instantly. Emma, there are aspects of your father's behavior that I've been concerned about for some time, I began carefully. I believe he's developed some unhealthy coping mechanisms since losing your grandfather. You mean the gambling, she said flatly, surprising me. And the drinking. I'm not blind, Grandma. No, you're not, I acknowledged, pride mixing with sadness at how much she'd been forced to see. Emma, I want you to know something important. Regardless of what's happening with your father, your future and Jacob's care are secure. The trust your grandfather established ensures that. Then why won't Dad let us see you? Why does he get so angry whenever your name comes up? Tears were forming in her eyes now, the composed young woman momentarily giving way to the confused child beneath. Because I'm the one person who can say, no to him, I said simply. As trustee, I control the distribution of funds until you and Jacob reach certain ages. Your father disagrees with how I'm fulfilling that responsibility. Understanding dawned on her face. He wants the money. He wants what he believes is rightfully his, I corrected gently. But your grandfather structured things to protect all of you, including your father from himself if necessary. She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she asked, does he know that you're still paying for my school? And Jacob's doctors? No, I admitted. He's refused to speak with me directly for over a year now. All communication goes through his attorneys. Attorneys? Her eyes widened. Is he suing you? Not exactly. He's attempting to challenge the terms of the trust. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. But he won't succeed, Emma. I promise you that. Our food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As we ate, I watched Emma processing everything I'd told her. Her sharp mind, another inheritance from her grandfather, connecting dots I hadn't explicitly linked. What happens next month when I turn 18? She finally asked. Dad keeps talking about it like something changes. You'll gain access to your education trust, I explained. It's a separate fund specifically for your college expenses. The main trust doesn't distribute until you're 25. She nodded slowly. And Dad thinks he can get me to give him the money from the education trust. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. He might see it as a solution to his immediate problems. But it's not. It's my future. Her voice was stronger now, resolved. Grandpa wanted me to go to college without worrying about money. That was his gift to me. Yes, I said simply, pride swelling in my chest at her clarity. Emma straightened, her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of Robert that it took my breath away. I need to get back to living with you, Grandma. Both Jacob and me. It's not good for us at Dad's anymore. The request caught me off guard. Emma, that's not a simple matter. Your father has custody. I'm almost 18, she interrupted. And Jacob needs stability for his treatment. Dad's barely home, and when he is... She trailed off, but her expression told me enough. Are you afraid of him? I asked sharply, my protective instincts flaring. Not physically, she clarified quickly. He'd never hurt us, but he's unpredictable now. Angry one minute, making grand promises the next. Last week, he came home at 3 a.m, woke us both up to announce we were going to Disney World, started packing bags. By morning, he'd forgotten all about it. The behavior she described was alarmingly erratic, worse than I'd realized from my surveillance reports. "Emma, if things are that unstable, there are legal steps we can take. But they would require formally documenting your father's behavior, which would destroy what's left of our relationship," she finished. "I know. That's why I haven't said anything until now." She hesitated, then added quietly, "But Jacob's getting worse, Grandma. The stress isn't good for his condition." I made a decision then, one I should have made months ago. "I'll speak with my attorneys tomorrow. We'll find a solution that protects both of you without unnecessarily damaging your relationship with your father." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you." As I drove Emma home later that evening, I noticed how she tensed as we approached the once beautiful Tudor-style house that Andrew had purchased after his marriage. Now the lawn was overgrown, the flower beds Robert had helped plant, with his grandchildren choked with weeds. "Call me if you need anything," I said as she gathered her school bag. "Day or night?" "I will." She hesitated, then leaned over to kiss my cheek. "Grandma, Dad's not a bad person. He's just lost." "I know, sweetheart." And I did know. Somewhere, beneath the anger and addiction was still my son, the boy who'd inherited his father's sharp mind and my stubborn determination. But recognizing that didn't change the decisions I had to make. "I'll call you tomorrow." As I watched her walk to the front door, shoulders squared with a courage no teenager should have to summon simply to enter their own home, I felt a resolve crystallize within me. The time for half measures and distant protection was over. Andrew had made his choice 2 years ago when he turned away from me after Robert's death. Now I would make mine. Pulling out my phone, I texted Patricia. "Move up the board meeting. Tomorrow morning. It's time." Her response came seconds later. "Finally." Back at my house, our house, Robert's and mine, I went straight to his study, the room I'd preserved almost exactly as he'd left it. Sitting at his desk, I opened the hidden compartment he'd shown me during those final months when he'd been preparing me to take over. Inside was a leather journal, his elegant handwriting filling page after page with observations about our son that spanned decades. Robert had seen the warning signs long before I had recognized the fragility beneath Andrew's confident exterior. The final entry, dated just days before his death, read simply, "Eleanor will protect them all, even from themselves." It's why I chose her. I closed the journal, a plan already forming. Tomorrow, I would begin the legal process of removing Andrew as a beneficiary of the Mitchell family trust. It would be seen as the act of a cruel, controlling mother by some. Andrew would fight it bitterly, would likely never forgive me. But this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about fulfilling the responsibility Robert had entrusted to me. Andrew had abandoned me after his father's death, retreating into a spiral of self-destruction rather than facing his grief. Now I controlled the trust fund his children needed, and I would use that power exactly as Robert had intended, to protect our family's legacy, especially from those who would squander it. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been avoiding for 2 years. But tonight, sitting in the quiet study surrounded by memories of the man who'd believed in my strength even when I doubted it myself, I felt nothing but calm certainty. "Watch me, Robert," I whispered to the empty room. "I won't let you down." Morning arrived with the crisp certainty of an inevitable confrontation. I dressed with particular care, selecting a tailored navy suit that Robert had always said gave me an air of authority. Today, I would need every advantage. The McAllister and Partners boardroom was already filled when I arrived, 15 minutes. Early, as was my custom. The 10 board members, mostly men in their 50s and 60s who had been Robert's colleagues and friends, were gathered in small clusters, conversations halting as I entered. Patricia caught my eye from across the room, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. Eleanor, Gordon Wells, the oldest board member and a founding partner alongside Robert, greeted me with the patronizing smile he always reserved for me. Always. Lovely to see you. We were just discussing whether we should delay some of these more technical discussions until next week when I'm not here to slow things down. I finished for him, my voice pleasant but firm. That won't be necessary, Gordon. In fact, I've requested this emergency meeting specifically to address some urgent matters regarding the Mitchell family trust. His eyebrows rose slightly. I was under the impression this was a regular quarterly review. Quarterly reviews don't typically require the presence of our legal team, I noted, gesturing toward the door where Diane Sawyer, the firm's head legal counsel, was entering with two of her associates. Gordon's smile faltered. Like most of the board, he still viewed me as Robert's decorative widow, a ceremonial figure who attended meetings out of sentiment rather than actual authority. They had never bothered to look closely at the shareholding structure Robert had, quietly established in the years before his death, one that left me with controlling interest in both the firm and our family's various enterprises. "Shall we begin?" I suggested, moving toward my seat at the head of the table, Robert's former position. It was a small statement, but a meaningful one. Until now, I had always sat to the right of the empty chair they kept as a sign of respect for my late husband. The room quieted as I took my place, a few exchanged glances revealing the board members' confusion. Patricia, ever my ally, smoothly distributed folders containing the documents we had prepared. "Before we begin the standard quarterly review," I announced once everyone was seated, "I need to address an urgent matter concerning the Mitchell Family Trust, specifically as it relates to my son Andrew's position as a beneficiary." The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Most of these men had known Andrew since he was a child, had watched him grow up and eventually join the firm as an investment analyst before leaving to start his own venture capital fund, a fund that had quietly collapsed 6 months after Robert's death, though few knew the details of that failure. As most of you know, Robert established the trust with specific provisions regarding distribution of assets, I continued, opening my folder to reference the documents inside. Those provisions included a clause allowing for the removal of a beneficiary under certain circumstances. Gordon cleared his throat. "Eleanor, with all due respect, family matters are perhaps best handled privately, not in a board meeting." "Under normal circumstances, I would agree," I replied evenly. "However, since the trust holds a significant portion of its assets in McAllister and Partners investments, any restructuring affects this board and requires your awareness, if not your approval." Diane Sawyer stepped forward. "If I may?" At my nod, she addressed the board. "The Mitchell Family Trust currently controls approximately 22% of McAllister and Partners holdings. Any significant change to the trust structure could potentially impact stock distribution and voting rights within the firm. That got their attention. Nothing motivated investment bankers quite like the prospect of shifting power dynamics. "What exactly are you proposing, Eleanor?" asked Michael Chen, one of the younger board members who had always shown me more respect than most. "I am exercising my authority as trustee to remove Andrew Mitchell as a beneficiary of the primary family trust," I stated clearly, my voice betraying none of the emotional turmoil behind the decision. "His portion will be redistributed into 2 separate trusts, one for each of his children, with enhanced protections to ensure the assets are used solely for their benefit." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Gordon's incredulous laugh. "You can't be serious? Cutting off your own son?" "I'm deadly serious," I replied, nodding to Patricia, who began distributing a second set of documents. "These are records of Andrew's financial activities over the past 24 months, documented by a licensed private investigator and verified by forensic accountants." As the board members flipped through the damning evidence, bank records showing massive withdrawals at casinos, credit card statements detailing a lifestyle far beyond his means, loan applications with falsified information, their expressions shifted from skepticism to shock. "There's more," I continued. Andrew has made 3 separate attempts to access trust funds through fraudulent means, including forging my signature on distribution requests and attempting to impersonate Robert in communications with our European banking partners. Good God, muttered Gordon, the color draining from his face as he reached the section detailing Andrew's most recent activities. Does he realize this could result in criminal charges? He's not thinking clearly, I said, allowing a hint of maternal pain to color my voice. Which is precisely why I must act to protect both him and his children from further damage. Diane stepped forward again. The trust terms are explicit. Section 14. Paragraph C states that the trustee may remove a beneficiary who demonstrates patterns of financial misconduct, addiction, or behavior that threatens the integrity of the trust assets. The documentation provided meets and exceeds the burden of proof required. Even so, Gordon protested, though with less conviction. This is your son, Eleanor. Surely there's another way to address these concerns. I've spent 2 years exploring other options, I said quietly. 2 years watching my son spiral further into addiction while alienating his children from me. 2 years trying to protect my grandchildren without taking this step. I met Gordon's gaze directly. If you can suggest an alternative that I haven't already considered and attempted, I'm listening. His eyes dropped first. He had no suggestions because there were none to be made. The evidence was irrefutable, the pattern established, the damage ongoing. What about Andrew's children? Michael asked, his tone gentler than Gordon's had been. How will this affect them? Jacob and Emma will each have their own trusts, structured to provide for their specific needs, I explained. Jacob's will focus primarily on his medical care, while Emma's will secure her education and future stability. I've also initiated legal proceedings to obtain custodial rights, at least temporarily. This announcement caused another ripple of surprise around the table. Taking custody of my grandchildren was a step beyond financial reorganization. It was a complete intervention in my son's life. Is that really necessary? Gordon asked. Before I could respond, Patricia spoke up. Perhaps Mrs. Mitchell should share the most recent incident report. I hesitated, then nodded. 3 days ago, Jacob, my 14-year-old grandson who suffers from a chronic autoimmune condition, was found alone in the house by his sister. He was experiencing a severe flare-up, unable to reach his medication, and had been trying to contact his father for hours. Emma eventually called an ambulance when she couldn't locate Andrew. I paused, controlling the anger that threatened to crack my composed exterior. My son was at a casino in Atlantic City at the time. He didn't return home until the following afternoon. The room fell silent again, this time with the uncomfortable weight of understanding. Even Gordon looked subdued. The legal proceedings will be handled with the utmost discretion, Diane assured the board. But Mrs. Mitchell wanted you all informed of the situation, as it may generate some media attention given the family's profile in the community. I'd like the board's support, I said, looking around the table at the men who had respected my husband but had largely overlooked me, not just officially regarding the trust restructuring, but personally, as friends of Robert who I know would want his grandchildren protected. One by one, they nodded their agreement. Even Gordon, though his eyes still held reservations, he was too tactful to voice. Thank you, I said simply. Now, shall we proceed to the quarterly review? The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of financial reports and investment strategies. I participated actively, asking pointed questions about portfolio performance that clearly surprised some of the board members who had never heard me speak so knowledgeably about investment matters. By the time we adjourned 2 hours later, I had established a subtle but unmistakable shift in how they perceived me. As the boardroom emptied, Gordon lingered behind, approaching me as I gathered my materials. Robert never told us, he said quietly. Told? You what? That you understood all of this. He gestured to the financial reports spread across the table. He always spoke of you as his sounding board, but I assumed it was, well, the kind of thing husbands say. Robert never felt the need to prove my value to others, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. And I never felt the need to correct anyone's assumptions. A look of genuine respect flickered across his face. He chose his trustee well. I didn't see it before, but I do now. Thank you, Gordon. That would have meant a lot to him. After he left, Patricia joined me at the table. That went better than expected. The evidence was compelling, I said, closing my folder. And they're businessmen first. Once they understood the financial implications, personal feelings became secondary. What's your next move? She asked as we walked toward the elevator. I'm meeting with the family court judge this afternoon. Emma sent me some concerning texts last night after I dropped her off. Andrew came home intoxicated, making accusations about her conspiring with me. Patricia frowned. Do you think he's becoming dangerous? Not physically, but emotionally. Yes. The elevator doors closed, giving us privacy. Patricia, there's something I haven't shared with the board. The private investigator found evidence that Andrew may be involved with loan sharks to cover his gambling debts. If that's true, it's not just his financial security at risk. It could be his physical safety and potentially the children's. Jesus, Ellie, Patricia breathed. Does he realize what he's gotten himself into? I don't think he's capable of rational assessment anymore, I admitted, the professional mask slipping for a moment to reveal the worried mother beneath. Which makes today's actions even more necessary. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I straightened my shoulders, composing myself before the doors opened. I should go. Judge Harriman is expecting me at 2. Keep me updated, Patricia said, squeezing my arm briefly. And Ellie? You're doing the right thing. Robert would be proud. As my car pulled away from McAllister and Partners, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Emma and a text message. Dad's looking for financial papers. He's tearing the house apart. Jacob's scared. My heart raced as I called her back, relieved when she answered immediately. Grandma, I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. He keeps saying you're trying to steal everything, that we need to find the original trust documents. Emma, listen to me carefully, I said, keeping my voice calm, despite my rising concern. Is your father still in the house? Yes, he's upstairs in his office. He doesn't know I'm calling you. Are you and Jacob safe right now? Has he threatened you in any way? No, nothing like that, she assured me quickly. He's just frantic. I've never seen him like this. I want you to take Jacob and go to Mrs. Patel's house next door, I instructed, referring to their elderly neighbor who had been a friend of the family for years. Tell her you're waiting for me to pick you up. But Dad will be even angrier. If we leave, Emma, I interrupted gently, I'm on my way to see Judge Harriman right now about getting temporary custody of you and your brother. I need you somewhere safe until that's arranged. There was a pause as she processed this. You're taking us away from Dad? Officially. Temporarily, I emphasized, though I wasn't certain how temporary it would be. Until he gets the help he needs. Can you do as I ask? Please, sweetheart. Okay, she said finally. I'll tell Jacob we're going to visit Mrs. Patel. Good girl. I'll have someone pick you up within the hour. After ending the call, I immediately phoned my security consultant, a former police detective named Ray Morales, who had worked with Robert on corporate security matters for years. Ray, I need someone at 47 Oakwood Drive right away. My grandchildren need to be picked up from the neighbor's house, a Mrs. Patel at number 45, and brought to my home. It's urgent. I'll send Williams, he replied without hesitation. He can be there in 20 minutes. Should I be concerned about interference? My son is in the house and apparently in a volatile state. He's not typically violent, but he's under extreme stress and possibly not sober. Understood. Williams will be discreet but prepared. Thank you, Ray. My next call was to Diane Sawyer. Diane, I need to move up the custody hearing if possible. The situation has escalated at Andrew's house. I'll call Judge Harriman's clerk immediately, she promised. You're still meeting with him at 2? Yes, but now I'll be requesting an emergency temporary order rather than just discussing options. I'll have the paperwork ready. Do you have documentation of the current situation? Emma's text messages and call, plus the investigator's reports from the past week. Will that be sufficient? It should be, especially given the medical neglect incident with Jacob. I'll see you at the courthouse. By the time I arrived at the D County Courthouse, Diane was waiting on the steps with a thick folder of documents. Inside Judge Harriman's chambers, I maintained my composure as I detailed the deteriorating situation with Andrew, presenting evidence of his neglect, emotional volatility, and financial irresponsibility. Judge Harriman, a stern woman in her 60s, who had known Robert through their work on various charitable boards, reviewed the materials carefully. Mrs. Mitchell, while the evidence is certainly concerning, removing children from their parent is not a step I take lightly, she said finally, looking at me over her reading glasses. Have you attempted family counseling or intervention? Multiple times, I confirmed. Andrew has refused all offers of assistance and has systematically cut me off from regular contact with the children. What contact I do have with them has been maintained largely without his knowledge or consent. She frowned. And the children's mother? Shannon died of breast cancer 4 years ago, I reminded her gently. Before Robert's illness began, the judge nodded, recalling the detail. Yes, of course. I remember now. She continued reviewing the documents, pausing at the medical records for Jacob. This child's condition requires consistent care and monitoring? Yes, Your Honor. He has juvenile dermatomyositis, which causes inflammation of the blood vessels under the skin and in the muscle tissue. Without proper medication and care, flare-ups can be extremely painful and potentially dangerous. And you're alleging that Mr. Mitchell has failed to ensure this care is provided? The emergency room records from 3 days ago confirm that Jacob missed 2 doses of his medication because Andrew was unreachable, Diane interjected. The attending physician noted concerns about potential medical neglect in his report. Judge Harriman's expression hardened slightly. I see. She set the papers down and looked at me directly. Mrs. Mitchell, are you prepared to take full responsibility for both children's care if I grant this emergency order? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. My home is ready for them, and I've arranged for Jacob's medical team to transition. His care to specialists who can see him at facilities closer to my residence. After a moment of consideration, she nodded. I'm granting the emergency temporary custody order, effective immediately for 14 days. We'll schedule a full hearing before that period expires to determine longer-term arrangements. She reached for her pen. I'm also ordering a full psychological evaluation of Andrew Mitchell and an assessment of his home environment. Relief washed over me, though I maintained my composed exterior. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Mitchell, she cautioned, signing the order. This situation will likely get worse before it gets better. Your son won't take this lying down. I'm prepared for that, I assured her, thinking of the security measures I'd already implemented at my home. As we left the courthouse, Diane handed me the custody order. You should know that Andrew's attorney called me while you were with the judge. Apparently, he's threatening to contest the trust restructuring. On what grounds? He's claiming you've had a mental break since Robert's death and are unfit to serve as trustee. Her tone made it clear how ridiculous she found this assertion. They're gathering evidence of your supposed decline, including testimony from household staff about changed behaviors. I almost laughed. He won't find any staff willing to lie for him. Robert and I always treated our employees with respect, unlike Andrew, who goes through housekeepers like tissues. Nevertheless, be prepared for things to get ugly. Once he learns about the custody order, he'll likely escalate his attacks. I've been preparing for this confrontation for 2 years, I told her. Andrew doesn't realize that Robert and I planned for every contingency, including this one. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Children safely transported to your residence. Williams remaining on premises as requested. The children are at my house, I informed Diane. Now I need to go home and help them settle in. Call me if Andrew causes any problems, she said. The order prohibits him from coming to your property without prior arrangement for visitation. As my car pulled into the driveway of my home, I spotted Emma and Jacob waiting anxiously on the front steps, their faces lighting up as I emerged. Jacob ran to me first, his thin arms wrapping around my waist with a desperation that broke my heart. At 14, he was still small for his age, his growth stunted by both his condition and the medications controlling it. Grandma, he mumbled against my jacket. Is it true? We get to stay with you now? For the time being, yes, I confirmed, hugging him gently, mindful of the tender spots his condition could create. Let's get you settled, and then we can talk about everything. Emma approached more cautiously, her young face serious beyond her years. Dad called while we were at Mrs. Patel's, she informed me quietly. He was not happy. I'm sure he wasn't, I acknowledged, putting an arm around her shoulders. But right now, my concern is for you and Jacob. Let's go inside. I had prepared the children's rooms weeks ago, hoping but not certain this day would come. Jacob's room had been equipped with adaptive features to accommodate his needs during flare-ups, while Emma's had been decorated to match her tastes as I remembered them, though I knew those might have evolved in the months since I'd last seen her bedroom at Andrew's house. This is really nice, Emma said softly as she surveyed her room, running her fingers over the desk where I'd placed a new laptop and art supplies, remembering her interest in design. You did all this for us? Before you knew we'd be staying? I always hoped you would visit more often, I told her honestly. And I wanted you to have your own spaces here, even if it was just for weekends or holidays. Jacob was already exploring his room across the hall, exclaiming over the gaming system I'd installed after consulting with a child psychologist about age-appropriate activities that could be enjoyed even during periods of limited mobility. Your medications are being transferred to our local pharmacy, I explained as we gathered in the kitchen later. Sandra had prepared a light dinner, aware of Jacob's dietary restrictions. Dr. Patel will see you tomorrow morning to establish care. Emma, I've arranged for your school records to be sent to Westfield Academy, where you were previously enrolled. They're expecting you on Monday. Jacob looked up from his plate. What about Dad? Is he allowed to visit us? I chose my words carefully. Your father will have scheduled visitation times, yes, but for now, this is where you'll be living. He's going to fight this, Emma stated. Not a question, but a certainty. Probably, I agreed, seeing no point in shielding them from a truth they already understood. But that doesn't change the fact that both of you deserve stability and proper care. Is Dad in trouble? Jacob asked, his young face creased with worry. Like, with the police? I hesitated, unsure how much to share about the potential loan shark connections or fraudulent financial activities. Your father is going through a difficult time and has made some poor choices. My hope is that this separation will give him the wake-up call he needs to seek help. He won't, Emma said flatly. He'll just get angrier. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Andrew's number. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway to answer. How dare you? He hissed without preamble. His words slightly slurred. Taking my children? Turning them against me? Andrew, I replied calmly. You're upset, and I understand that. But this was necessary for Jacob and Emma's well-being. Necessary? He gave a harsh laugh. The only thing necessary was for you. To maintain control, wasn't it? First Dad's money, now my kids. What's next, Mother? The venom in his voice was painful to hear from the son who had once brought me dandelions from the yard, proudly declaring them the prettiest flowers for the prettiest mom. Where had that sweet boy gone? The children need stability and proper care, I said evenly. When you're ready to discuss this rationally, we can talk about steps forward. For now, please respect the court order. Visitation can be arranged through my attorney. Court order? You went behind my back to a judge? His voice rose dangerously. You'll regret this, Mother. I swear to God you'll regret this. Andrew, please. But he had already hung up. I stood in the hallway for a moment, collecting myself before returning to the kitchen where Emma and Jacob waited, their young faces tight with anxiety. Was that Dad? Jacob asked, though he clearly knew the answer. Yes, I admitted, seeing no point in lying. He's upset, which is understandable. This is a big change for everyone. Emma's eyes met mine, knowing and far too perceptive. He threatened you, didn't he? I considered deflecting, then decided against it. These children had already endured too much instability and deception. He's angry and saying things he doesn't mean, I said carefully. But you don't need to worry about that. You're safe here, and that's what matters. Later that night, after both children had gone to bed, Jacob exhausted from the emotional day, Emma reluctantly retreating to her new room with promises to text her friends about the sudden move, I sat in Robert's study, the custody order on the desk before me. The house felt different with the children under its roof, more alive somehow, despite the circumstances that had brought them here. Their presence filled a void that had existed since Robert's death, perhaps even before, when Andrew had first begun pulling away from us. My phone lit up with a text from Patricia. How are they settling in? I typed back, as well as can be expected. Andrew called, making threats. Her response came quickly. Need security overnight? I considered the question. Andrew had never been physically violent, but his unpredictability was growing, and the desperation in his voice had been new and concerning. Already arranged, I replied. Ray has someone watching the property. Smart. Board members all called me after the meeting. They're firmly behind you now, even Gordon. That was something, at least. The support of Robert's closest business associates wouldn't ease the pain of confronting my own son, but it would make protecting his children easier. I moved to the window, looking out at the dark gardens where Jacob and Emma had once played. During Sunday family dinners, where Andrew had taught Emma to ride a bicycle, where Robert had built a treehouse that still stood in the old oak tree. So many memories in this place, layers of family history that Andrew seemed determined to destroy in his spiral of self-destruction. My phone buzzed again, not Patricia this time, but a notification from the security system. Someone was at the front gate. Checking the camera feed on my tablet, I saw Andrew's car idling outside, his face barely visible through the windshield in the darkness. He didn't attempt to use the call box or open the gate. He simply sat there, watching the house, from a distance. I considered calling Ray to have his security person approach Andrew, then decided against it. Confrontation would only escalate the situation. Instead, I watched silently as my son sat outside his childhood home, separated from his children and his inheritance by wrought iron gates and his own destructive choices. After 15 minutes, he drove away, tires squealing on the pavement in a childish display of anger. I remained at the window long after he'd gone, wondering if Robert had foreseen this exact scenario when he'd structured the trust as he had, when he'd selected me. As trustee, despite tradition dictating it should have been our son. You knew, I whispered to the empty room. You knew he wasn't ready for the responsibility. There was no answer, of course. Just the weight of decisions that had to be made, and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges as Andrew, realized the full extent of what he'd lost through his own actions. I closed the security app and opened the trust documents once more, reviewing the provisions Robert had established for rehabilitation and redemption. Because despite everything, he had never given up hope that our son would eventually find his way back to the values we had tried to instill in him, and neither had I, even now, as I prepared for what would undoubtedly become the most painful, legal battle of my life: mother against son, trustee against beneficiary, past legacy against future security. Some would call me cruel for what I'd done today. The society pages would whisper about the cold-hearted widow who cut off her grieving son. Andrew himself would paint me as a controlling monster, desperate to maintain power over Robert's fortune. None of them would understand that every decision, every legal maneuver, every painful confrontation was guided by the same fierce love that had made me stand by Robert through building his empire. The same protective instinct that had once made me check Andrew's closet for monsters when he was small. The monsters were real now: addiction, financial ruin, neglect, and I would fight them with every weapon at my disposal, even if it meant becoming the villain in my son's story. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight, for the first time in 2 years, both of Robert's grandchildren slept safely under my roof. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. The first week with Jacob and Emma under my roof brought challenges I hadn't fully anticipated. Physical safety and financial security were just the beginning, the emotional landscape was far more complex. "I don't need to take all these pills," Jacob insisted on our third morning, pushing away the carefully arranged medication organizer I'd prepared according to his doctor's instructions. "Dad let me skip the afternoon ones because they make me feel sick." "Your father isn't a doctor," I replied firmly, sliding the organizer back toward him. "And Dr. Patel was very clear about how important the full regimen is for managing your condition." Jacob's expression darkened with the particular stubbornness that reminded me so much of Andrew at the same age. "Dad says doctors just push pills to make money." "Your grandfather trusted Dr. Patel with his own health," I countered, using Robert's memory as the gentle leverage it had always been with the children. "He wouldn't have recommended him for you if he didn't believe he was the very best." Mention of Robert softened Jacob's resistance slightly. He picked up the first pill reluctantly. "Did Grandpa take a lot of medications too?" "Toward the end, yes," I said, watching him swallow the pill before reaching for the next one. "And he didn't like it either. But he understood they were necessary." Emma entered the kitchen as Jacob finished his medications, her hair damp from the shower, dressed in the Westfield Academy uniform she hadn't worn in over a year. She looked both younger and older somehow. The familiar navy blazer and plaid skirt a reminder of the child she had been, while the wary calculation in her eyes belonged to someone far beyond her 17 years. "How does it feel to be going back?" I asked, pouring her a cup of the coffee she'd recently started drinking. "Weird," she admitted, accepting the mug with a small smile. "But good, I think. My old friends are still there." "Traitor," Jacob muttered, though without real malice. He would be returning to Westfield as well the following week, once his medical transition was complete. Public school was way more chill. Public. "School was a disaster for your grades," Emma countered, ruffling his hair as she passed. "And Grandma already arranged for your gaming buddy Alex to come over this weekend, so stop complaining." The easy banter between them was encouraging. Despite everything, they had maintained the close bond that had always characterized their relationship. Each had become the other's protector in the tumultuous environment Andrew had created. Emma ensuring Jacob's medical needs were addressed. Jacob providing emotional support when Emma struggled with the pressure of becoming the de facto parent in their household. "Martin will drive you to school," I told Emma, referring to my longtime chauffeur. "And pick you up afterward. Just text him if you need anything during the day." "I can take the bus like normal kids, Grandma," she protested, though without conviction. Humor. "Me," I replied. "At least for the first week. until we establish a routine. The truth, which I didn't share with her, was that Andrew had made 2 more concerning appearances since the night at the gate. Once at McAllister and Partners, demanding to see me before security escorted him out, and once at the children's former school, attempting to withdraw them despite no longer having custody. Ray had advised increased security measures, including monitored transportation for both children. After Emma and Martin departed for Westfield, I settled Jacob in the sunroom with his online schoolwork, a temporary arrangement until his formal transfer was complete. Sandra would keep an eye on him while I attended to pressing business matters that couldn't be postponed, even with the family upheaval. "I'll be in my study for a few hours," I told him, setting a glass of water beside his medications for later. "Sandra is making your favorite chicken soup for lunch." He nodded without looking up from his laptop, already engrossed in a science assignment. The focused concentration on his face was pure Robert, the same intensity, the same slight furrow between his brows when he encountered a challenging concept. In my study, I found 3 urgent messages waiting. The first was from Diane, informing me that Andrew had filed an emergency motion to overturn the custody order, claiming I had manipulated the children and fabricated evidence of neglect. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. The second was from Ray, with a security update that made my blood run cold. Andrew met with known associate of Victor Diaz last night. Surveillance photos attached. Victor Diaz was a loan shark with connections to organized crime in Atlantic City, exactly the sort of dangerous entanglement I had feared. Opening the attached photos, I saw Andrew in an all-night diner, sitting across from a heavily tattooed man whose reputation preceded him. The implications were clear and frightening. The third message was from Patricia. "Gordon Wells received threatening call from Andrew. Says he has dirt on the firm's overseas operations. Wants board meeting records from last week. I've advised Gordon to document everything. Call me." I sank into my chair, the weight of Andrew's escalating behavior settling heavily on my shoulders. He wasn't just fighting the custody arrangement. He was lashing out in all directions, attempting to undermine my position at the firm, threatening board members, and most alarmingly, deepening his connections to dangerous criminals. After calling Patricia to discuss the situation with Gordon, we agreed to have security briefings for all board members as a precaution. I dialed Ray directly. "How reliable is this information about Diaz?" I asked without preamble when he answered. "Very," Ray replied, his tone grim. "My source is former organized crime division, still has connections throughout the network. Diaz doesn't meet personally, unless the debt is significant or there's a problem with payment." "Do we know how much Andrew owes?" "Not exact figures, but based on his recent casino losses and his known assets, we're estimating between $300,000 and $500,000. The figure staggered me, though perhaps it shouldn't have given the evidence I'd seen of Andrew's gambling addiction. "Is he in immediate danger?" "Hard to say. Diaz typically gives people chances to pay. He's businesslike in his own way. But if Andrew's been missing payments or making promises he can't keep?" Ray let the implication hang. "And what about the children? Could they be at risk?" Ray's pause told me more than his words. "I've increased security at your property as a precaution. I don't think Diaz would target family members directly, but it's better to be safe." After ending the call, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the escalating stakes. What had started as protecting my grandchildren from their father's financial irresponsibility had evolved into something far more dangerous. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Sandra peeked in, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Mitchell, but there's someone at the gate insisting on seeing you." "A Ms. Walsh? She says she's a friend of Andrew's." "Cassandra Walsh." The name was vaguely familiar. I recalled Andrew mentioning her as a colleague from his venture capital days. "Did she say what she wants?" "Just that it's urgent and concerns the children." I hesitated, wary of anyone connected to Andrew given recent events, but also conscious that alienating his legitimate associates would only reinforce his narrative of me as controlling and unreasonable. Have Ray's security person check her identification, then you can let her in. Show her to the garden terrace, please. I'll meet her there. The garden terrace offered both privacy and security, open enough that I could easily call for assistance, if needed, but removed from the main house where Jacob was working. As I made my way there, I instructed Sandra to keep an eye on Jacob and ensure he remained in the sunroom until our visitor departed. Cassandra Walsh was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with a polished professional appearance. That suggested corporate success. She stood as I approached, extending her hand with a confidence that wasn't entirely convincing. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I'm Cassandra Walsh. I worked with Andrew at Meridian Ventures. Ms. Walsh, I acknowledged, shaking her hand before gesturing to the seating area. Sandra mentioned it was urgent and involves my grandchildren? Yes. She sat, placing her designer handbag carefully beside her chair. I understand they're living with you now, under a temporary custody arrangement. I nodded, not offering further details. May I ask what your interest is in this family matter? She hesitated, seemingly gathering her thoughts. Andrew and I have been close friends for the past year. I care about him, and I'm concerned about what's happening. The careful phrasing suggested a romantic relationship, though her discomfort indicated it might be complicated. I wondered if she knew about his gambling, his debts, his neglect of his children. I appreciate your concern, Ms. Walsh, but as you noted, this is a family matter being handled through appropriate legal channels. With all due respect, Mrs. Mitchell, I don't think you understand how devastated Andrew is about losing his children. Her voice took on an edge of accusation. He's already lost his father, his position at the firm, and now you've taken his kids. Ms. Walsh, I replied evenly, I understand you're speaking out of concern for someone you care about, but there are aspects of this situation you may not be privy to. He told me everything, she insisted, about how you've controlled the family money since his father died, how you've undermined his business ventures, how you've never approved of how he parents. I studied her carefully, noting the expensive watch, the flawless manicure, the subtle designer logo on her silk blouse. Did Andrew happen to mention his gambling debts, or his meetings with loan sharks, or perhaps the time he left his chronically ill 14-year-old son alone without access to medication? Her confidence faltered slightly. He's been under tremendous stress since losing his father, and he said you've twisted things to make him look bad. I imagine he did. I kept my voice calm, non-confrontational. Ms. Walsh, may I ask if Andrew knows you're here? She shifted uncomfortably. No, he'd be upset if he knew. He thinks you won't listen to reason. Yet you came anyway. Why? Because... She hesitated, then continued with more genuine emotion than she'd shown previously. Because I've seen how much he loves those kids. And I thought maybe if we could talk, woman to woman, we might find a compromise. There was something in her expression, a flicker of fear, perhaps, or uncertainty that made me reconsider my initial assessment. How long have you known Andrew, Ms. Walsh? About 3 years. We worked together before he left Meridian. And your relationship became personal? About a year ago, she admitted. After his father died. I nodded slowly. During the period, when his behavior began to change dramatically. Something in my tone must have resonated with her own concerns, because her defensive posture softened slightly. He has been different lately. More desperate. At first, I thought it was just grief. And now? She looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. Now, I'm not sure what to think. Last week, he asked me to co-sign a loan for him. A large one. When I asked what it was for, he got angry, said I didn't trust him. Did you sign it? No. She met my eyes again. That's when he told me about the custody situation, said once he got the children back and access to their trust funds, he'd be able to pay everyone back. The implication was clear and horrifying. Andrew saw his children as leverage to access money, not as vulnerable young people who needed protection and stability. Ms. Walsh, I said carefully, I don't doubt that Andrew loves his children in his way. But love isn't always enough, especially when there are other factors at play. Like what? Like addiction, I said simply. And the dangerous people he's become involved with to fund that addiction. She paled slightly. What dangerous people? I considered how much to reveal, weighing the potential benefits of having someone close to Andrew, aware of the true stakes against the risk of frightening her away entirely. Andrew owes a significant amount of money to individuals who don't typically write off bad debts, I said finally. His attempts to access his children's trust funds are directly related to those debts. Oh my God, she whispered. He told me he just had some temporary cash flow issues because of a delayed investment payout. Ms. Walsh, Cassandra, I amended, sensing an opportunity to gain an ally rather than an adversary. I understand your loyalty to Andrew. I share it despite everything. He's my son. But right now, the most important thing is protecting Jacob and Emma from the consequences of his decisions. She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. What's going to happen to him? That depends largely on him, I replied honestly. The custody arrangement includes provisions for supervised visitation. The trust restructuring includes options for rehabilitation support. There are paths forward, but Andrew has to be willing to acknowledge the problems and accept help. He won't, she said softly, confirming what I already knew in my heart. He's convinced himself that you're the only problem. Then I'll continue to do what's necessary to protect my grandchildren, I said firmly, even if it means being the villain in his story. She nodded slowly, then reached for her bag. I should go. He'll be wondering where I am. As she stood to leave, I made a decision. Cassandra, if you ever feel unsafe or concerned about Andrew's behavior, please don't hesitate to contact me. I wrote my private number on a card and handed it to her. This situation may get worse before it gets better. She accepted the card, studying it before slipping it into her bag. He's not a bad person, Mrs. Mitchell. He's just lost. I know, I said, the echo of Emma's words about her father striking a painful chord. That's what makes this so heartbreaking. After Cassandra left, I returned to my study to find a text from Emma. First day going okay. Weird being back, but better than I expected. How's Jacob? I smiled at the message, touched by her concern for her brother, even amid her own adjustment. He's doing well. Focused on schoolwork. How's lunch period? Sitting with old friends. They have questions, but being cool about it. Gotta go, Belle. Ringing. Love you. The simple love you at the end brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Despite Andrew's attempts to drive a wedge between us, despite the traumatic circumstances that had brought them back into my daily life, the bond with my grandchildren remained intact, perhaps even strengthened by the shared adversity. My moment of sentimentality was interrupted by an incoming call from Diane. Eleanor, we have a situation. Andrew's attorney has filed an emergency petition alleging parental alienation and requesting immediate reinstatement of custody. On what grounds? I asked, instantly alert. They're claiming you've cut off all communication between Andrew and the children, and that you've been systematically poisoning them against their father for years. That's absurd. I've facilitated daily phone calls since they arrived, exactly as the custody order stipulates. They're also alleging that Robert was mentally compromised when he established the trust terms, and that you exerted undue influence over him during his illness. This attack on Robert's mental capacity and my relationship with him stung more sharply than I expected. Robert was cognitively intact until the final weeks. We have medical documentation, witness statements from his doctors, video recordings of board meetings he chaired just days before adding those trust provisions. I know, Diane assured me. Their case is flimsy at best. But Judge Harriman has agreed to hear arguments tomorrow morning. It's a stall tactic, meant to cast doubt before the main custody hearing next week. Will the children need to appear? No, not for this procedural hearing. But Eleanor, she hesitated. If this moves forward, they may eventually need to speak with court-appointed evaluators. The thought of subjecting Emma and Jacob to interrogations about their father's behavior made my stomach clench. They had already shouldered too much responsibility, witnessed too much dysfunction. Now they might be forced to formally testify against their own father, or risk being returned to his unstable care. What's our best strategy? I asked, pushing aside my emotional reaction to focus on the practical. We come prepared with ironclad documentation, medical records for both Robert and Jacob, financial evidence of Andrew's misconduct, witness statements from Jacob's doctors regarding the missed medications. We demonstrate a pattern of behavior that justifies your actions. And regarding Robert's mental capacity, we bring in Dr. Levine, who supervised his care and can testify to his cognitive function. We have the video recordings from board meetings. We have the lawyer who drafted the trust provisions who can confirm Robert's clarity and intent. Will that be enough? It should be. Andrew's playing a weak hand, but playing it aggressively. Diane paused. There's something else you should know. The court received an anonymous tip suggesting you might be planning to leave the country with the children. What? The accusation was so outlandish I almost laughed. That's completely fabricated. I haven't left the country since Robert's diagnosis 5 years ago. I know, but the court has to investigate any claim involving potential child abduction. Expect questions about your travel plans, passport status, etc. After ending the call with Diane, I sat heavily in Robert's chair, the weight of Andrew's escalating tactics pressing down on me. He was not just fighting the custody decision. He was attacking my character, my relationship with Robert, my very integrity. And now he was planting seeds about international flight with the children, a desperate fabrication that nonetheless required formal response. The rational part of me understood that these were the flailing tactics of a desperate man, but the mother in me ached at how far my son had fallen, how completely he had abandoned the values we had tried to instill in him. My phone rang again. Ray this time. Mrs. Mitchell, we have a situation at Westfield Academy. Andrew showed up attempting to remove Emma from school. Security has detained him, but he's creating a scene. My heart raced. Is Emma all right? She's safe in the administrator's office. Andrew didn't make it past the front desk, but he's demanding to see her. I'm on my way, I said, already moving toward the door. Please ask Martin to bring the car around immediately. There's more, Ray continued. Andrew appears to be intoxicated, and he made several threats against you in front of school security. They're considering calling the police. Tell them to wait until I arrive if possible, I instructed. I'd prefer to handle this without involving law enforcement if we can. While Andrew's behavior warranted legal consequences, my first priority was minimizing trauma for Emma. Having her father arrested at her school on her first day back would be devastating. I quickly checked on Jacob, instructing Sandra to remain with him and explaining that I needed to pick up Emma early. Is something wrong? He asked, instantly alert to the tension in my voice. Just a small issue with school paperwork, I lied, hating the necessity of shielding him from yet another of his father's destructive episodes. Nothing to worry about. I'll be back with Emma soon. The 15-minute drive to Westfield Academy was interminable. I called Emma's phone twice, but she didn't answer, increasing my anxiety. When we finally arrived, Headmaster Collins was waiting at the entrance, his expression grave. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for coming quickly, he greeted me, leading me inside. This is an unfortunate situation. but I want to assure you that Emma is safe and no students witnessed the disturbance. Where is my son now? Security has him in a conference room. He refused to leave without seeing Emma, and rather than escalate the situation further, we thought it best to contain it until you arrived. He hesitated. Mrs. Mitchell, I should warn you that Andrew is not in a good state. I understand. May I see Emma first? He nodded, guiding me to his office where Emma sat rigid in a chair, her face pale but composed. When she saw me, her careful mask slipped momentarily, revealing the frightened teenager beneath. Grandma, she said, rising quickly. I'm sorry. He just showed up during lunch period and this isn't your fault, I interrupted gently, embracing her. Not in any way. She pulled back, her expression troubled. He was yelling things. About you. About Grandpa. People heard. People say all sorts of things when they're upset, I told her, though I knew the damage to her social standing had already been done. Teenagers were notoriously unforgiving of family drama, and Andrew's public spectacle would feed the rumor mill for weeks. Want to go home, she said quietly. Can we just go home? The simple plea broke my heart. After years of being the strong one in her household, the de facto parent to her brother, the buffer between her father's volatility and Jacob's vulnerability, she was finally asking to be protected rather than to protect. Of course, I assured her. But I need to speak with your father first. Would you prefer to wait here or in the car with Martin? The car, she said without hesitation. I don't want to see him right now. After arranging for Emma to be escorted to my car, I followed Headmaster Collins to the conference room where Andrew was being held. Through the small window in the door, I could see him pacing erratically, gesturing as he argued with the security guard. I should mention that we're obligated to report this incident to family court, given the custody situation, Collins informed me quietly. While we want to be supportive of families in difficult transitions, our primary responsibility is to our students' safety and well-being. I understand completely, I assured him. And I appreciate your handling of this situation with such discretion. Taking a deep breath, I entered the conference room. Andrew whirled toward me, his appearance shocking despite my mental preparation. His normally impeccable clothing was rumpled, his face flushed with anger and alcohol, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. Mother, he spat. The word twisted into an accusation. Come to complete your takeover? Not enough to steal my children and my inheritance? Now you're turning them against me entirely? Andrew, I said calmly, closing the door behind me. This isn't the place for this discussion. There is no discussion. His voice rose dangerously. You've made sure of that by hiding behind lawyers and court orders and security guards. I'm not hiding from anything. But this behavior, showing up intoxicated at your daughter's school, creating a public scene, this only reinforces the concerns that led to the custody decision. He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Always so reasonable, so measured. Did you use that same calm voice when you were convincing Dad I couldn't be trusted with the family business? When you were manipulating him into changing the trust, terms on his deathbed? Your father made his own decisions, Andrew. He saw the path you were heading down long before I did. Liar! He slammed his hand on the conference table, making me flinch despite my determination to remain composed. Dad believed in me. He was going to back my fund before he got sick. It was you who turned him against me. The complete revision of history was staggering. Robert had expressed serious concerns about Andrew's investment strategies years before. His illness had gently tried to guide him toward more sustainable approaches. That Andrew could now convince himself otherwise spoke to the depth of his delusion. Andrew, you're not well, I said quietly. You need help. With the drinking, with the gambling. There are excellent treatment programs. I don't need treatment, he interrupted furiously. I need what's rightfully mine, my children. My inheritance. The position in the firm that should have been mine after Dad died. The position you walked away from? I reminded him gently. You resigned 3 months after the funeral, Andrew. No one forced you out. Because I couldn't stand being under your thumb. His voice cracked slightly, a glimpse of genuine pain beneath the anger. Watching you sit in his chair, making decisions he would never have made, acting like you built that company when we all know you were just his wife. The dismissal stung, but I recognized it for what it was. The desperate lashing out of a man who had lost his moral compass, seeking external targets for his internal failures. Andrew, Emma is waiting in the car. Jacob is at home with Sandra. They need stability and care right now, not public scenes that humiliate them in front of their peers. They need their father, he insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. Yes, they do, I agreed softly. But they need their father healthy and present, not consumed by addiction and anger. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, a flash of the sun I remembered, the young man who had once possessed Robert's integrity and my determination. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by cold resentment. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've taken everything from me, but I still have options you haven't considered. If you're referring to Victor." "Diaz," I replied calmly, watching his eyes widen in shock at my knowledge. "I should warn you that associating with known criminals will only further damage your custody case. You're having me followed?" His voice rose in indignation. "I'm protecting my grandchildren," I corrected, "which includes being aware of potential dangers in their environment." He stared at me for a long moment, something calculating replacing the drunken rage in his expression. "You always think you're one step ahead, don't you, Mother? Just like Dad. Always the chess players, seeing moves before anyone else." "Andrew. But sometimes," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, "the player who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous one on the board." The implicit threat hung in the air between us, more chilling for its calm delivery than his earlier shouting had been. "Is that what we've come to?" I asked quietly. "Threats against your own mother? Against your children's grandmother?" "It's what you've brought us to," he corrected, moving toward the door. "And whatever happens next is on your conscience, not mine." "Andrew, please." I reached for his arm, but he jerked away violently. "Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. In fact, enjoy your time with my children while you can." He yanked open the door. "Things are about to change in ways you never anticipated." As he brushed past the security guard and strode down the hallway, his parting words echoed in my mind. Not just an angry threat made in the heat of the moment, but a cold statement of intent from a man with dangerous connections and nothing left to lose. Headmaster Collins appeared at my side, his expression concerned. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you all right?" "No," I admitted honestly, watching my son's retreating figure. "I don't believe any of us are." In the car, Emma sat silently beside me, her earlier composure cracking to reveal the exhaustion beneath. "He's getting worse," she finally said as we approached the house. "I've never seen him like that before." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Your father is struggling with some very difficult issues right now. He's going to do something bad, isn't he?" Her perceptiveness was sometimes a burden. She saw too much, understood too deeply for her 17 years. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "But whatever happens, my priority is keeping you and Jacob safe." As we pulled through the gates of the estate, I spotted Ray's car parked discreetly near the house, additional security arranged after Andrew's troubling appearance. The weight of the situation settled on me anew. My grandchildren essentially, under guard in their own home, my son making veiled threats, dangerous creditors circling on the periphery. "Grandma?" Emma's voice pulled me from my dark thoughts. "If Dad does something really bad, will we still be able to help him?" The question revealed the impossible burden she carried. torn between self-preservation and the instinct to protect. The parent who had failed to protect her. "We'll always try," I promised, though I wondered if that was still true. If there was a line Andrew could cross that would extinguish my own maternal instinct to rescue him. But right now, we need to focus on keeping everyone safe. As we entered the house, Jacob rushed to greet his sister, his relief at seeing her palpable. They immediately fell into their familiar pattern, Emma checking if he'd taken his medication, Jacob asking about her day at school, each looking after the other in ways children shouldn't have to. Watching them, I felt a renewed resolve hardening within me. Whatever Andrew was planning, whatever desperate measures his addiction and rage might drive him toward, I would be ready. I had underestimated his capacity for self-destruction once. I wouldn't make that mistake again. My phone buzzed, with a text from Patricia. "Security alert at main office. Andrew tried to access secure server room. Police involved. Call ASAP." And so it began. The escalation Andrew had promised. The desperate moves of a man with nothing left to lose. As I stepped away to return Patricia's call, I watched Emma and Jacob through the doorway, their heads bent together in quiet conversation, their young shoulders bearing weights no child should carry. "I will protect you," I whispered, a promise to them and to Robert's memory. "Whatever it takes." The following days unfolded with a sense of grim inevitability, each hour bringing new evidence of Andrew's determination to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, by any means necessary. After his failed attempt to access the secure server room at McAllister and Partners, he had evaded the responding police officers, disappearing before they could question him about the security breach. Ray's sources reported that he hadn't returned to his house, his credit cards showed no activity, and his phone appeared to be turned off. "It's like he's gone completely off the grid," Patricia noted during our emergency conference call with Diane and Ray. "The board is understandably concerned about what he might do next." "We've increased security at all company locations," Ray assured us, "and the children's schools have been advised of the situation, but without knowing where he is or what he's planning, we need to consider that he may attempt to access sensitive financial information," Diane interjected, "especially given his comments about having options and his meeting with Diaz. Could he be planning to offer company secrets in exchange for debt forgiveness?" The suggestion was troubling but plausible. Andrew had worked at the firm long enough to have knowledge of proprietary investment strategies, client lists, and potentially damaging internal communications that could be leveraged against us. "Patricia, have IT conduct a full audit of what Andrew accessed during his last months at the firm," I instructed, "and review any confidentiality agreements he signed upon departure." "Already underway," she confirmed. "We're also changing all security protocols and passwords as a precaution." "What about the custody hearing?" I asked Diane, turning to the matter that concerned me most. "It's scheduled for tomorrow morning. Will Andrew's recent behavior affect the proceedings?" "Significantly," Diane replied. "His attempt to remove Emma from school while intoxicated, followed by the security breach at the office, demonstrates a pattern of escalating, potentially criminal behavior. Judge Harriman has received police reports on both incidents." "And if he doesn't appear for the hearing?" "The court could issue a bench warrant, but more importantly, it would almost certainly result in an extension of your temporary custody arrangement, possibly with even stricter limitations on Andrew's access to the children." After the call ended, I sat in Robert's study, staring at the family photo that still held pride of place on his desk. Robert, Andrew, and me at Andrew's business school graduation, all smiles and optimism about the future. What had gone so terribly wrong? Had the seeds of Andrew's destruction been present even then, masked by achievement and ambition? Or had Robert's death truly triggered something in our son that we'd never anticipated? A soft knock at the door interrupted my reflection. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression hesitant. "Grandma? Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." I gestured for her to come in. Is everything all right? She settled into the chair across from me, absently running her fingers along the leather armrest. Jacob's asleep. The new medication makes him tired. Dr. Patel said that should improve as his body adjusts, I assured her. She nodded, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. Grandma, I found something when I was getting my old books from home last week. I didn't know whether to show you, but with everything happening. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket. I think it might be important. The notebook was unremarkable, a simple black moleskin with worn edges suggesting frequent use. What is it? Dad's, she explained, her voice low as if sharing a secret. He always kept it in his desk drawer. I saw him writing in it late at night sometimes, especially after he'd been drinking. I accepted the notebook carefully, aware of the significance of what Emma was sharing. Not just the object itself, but the fact that she was choosing to share it with me rather than protect her father's privacy. Have you read it? I asked gently. She shook her head. It felt wrong. But whatever's happening with Dad now, it's scaring me, Grandma. If there's something in there that could help us understand what he might do. The unfinished thought hung between us. Emma, at 17, was making the painful adult decision to prioritize safety over loyalty, to choose protection over privacy. It was a burden she shouldn't have to bear. You've done the right thing bringing this to me, I told her, setting the notebook on the desk without opening it. I'll look through it, and if there's anything that helps us keep everyone safe, I'll use it. But Emma, this isn't your responsibility. You don't have to be the one protecting everyone anymore. Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. But I've always been the one. Since Mom died, it's been my job to take care of Jacob, to manage Dad's moods, to keep everything from falling apart. I know, I said softly, moving around the desk to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. And you've been extraordinary. But you're 17, Emma. You deserve to be a teenager, not a parent. I don't know how to be just a teenager anymore, she admitted, a tear escaping down her cheek. I don't know who I am if I'm not taking care of everyone. Then we'll find out together, I promised, drawing her into an embrace that she accepted, with a vulnerability she rarely showed. One day at a time. After Emma returned to her room, I stared at the notebook for several long minutes, wrestling with the ethical implications of reading my son's private thoughts. But as Robert had often said during difficult business decisions, when the stakes are high enough, hesitation becomes its own form of failure. The first pages contained what I expected: scattered business ideas, meeting notes, random observations that revealed nothing particularly illuminating. But as I continued through the journal, the entries changed, becoming darker, more obsessive, the handwriting increasingly erratic. November 15th, 2 months after Robert's death. Mother watched me like a hawk at the board meeting today. Same expression she used to have when checking my homework as a child. She's never believed in me, not really. Dad did, though. He understood my vision for the fund, was ready to back me before he got sick. She poisoned him against me at the end, I'm sure of it. Now she's got her claws in the firm, playing the grieving widow while she consolidates power. Pathetic how the board can't see through her act. The bitter assessment of my relationship with Robert was painful to read, but unsurprising given Andrew's recent accusations. I continued turning pages, watching through his written words as his perspective became increasingly distorted. January 30th. Another concerned call from Mother today about the children. Always checking, always judging. She thinks I don't see what she's doing, trying to undermine me with my own kids. Emma's been distant lately. I catch her texting someone all the time, probably her grandmother feeding her doubts about me. March, 18. Had a good run at the Bellagio last night. Up almost $50K at one point. Could have walked away, should have walked away. Ended 30K down instead. Doesn't matter. Once Richards confirms the Asian investors, I'll have enough to cover everything. And finally get Mother off my back about money. She thinks I don't know she's been having me followed. Probably has spies in the casinos reporting back to her. The paranoia was evident, growing more pronounced with each entry. His gambling losses were casually noted, always paired with some imagined future windfall that would solve everything. The children appeared less and less frequently in his thoughts, becoming background characters in his narrative of persecution and imminent vindication. Then came entries that chilled me to the bone. May 4th. Met with Diaz again. Not happy about the delayed payment. Reminded me what happens to people who don't honor their commitments. As if I need reminding. Doesn't understand that I'm good for it. Better than good. Once I get control of the trust from Mother, I'll have millions. Tried to explain that the trust fund isn't just about money for college or whatever she tells the kids. That's just the surface. The real money is in the company holdings, the global investments, the property portfolios. Diaz gave me 2 weeks. Good enough. Richards has a plan to access emergency distributions if Mother won't cooperate. One way or another, I'll get what's mine. The entries continued, documenting a progressive detachment from reality, an increasingly desperate fixation on the family wealth, and a dangerous entanglement with Diaz and other loan sharks. The final entry, dated just 3 days ago, sent a chill through me. They've left me no choice. Mother has taken my children, blocked my access to what's rightfully mine, humiliated me in front of the board. Richard says there's one last option, the contingency plan. The original trust documents in the safe deposit box could change everything. Mother thinks she has all the power, but Dad left a back door. He always did. Once I have those papers, I'll finally be able to take back control, and if she tries to stop me, she'll regret it. Some fires can't be extinguished once they start. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling slightly. The implications were clear and frightening. Andrew was planning something drastic involving original trust documents he believed were in a safe deposit box, and his cryptic reference to fires suggested a scorched earth approach that could harm the family, the company, or both. I immediately called Ray, putting the phone on speaker as I photographed the most concerning pages of the journal. Andrew believes there are original trust documents in a safe deposit box that could somehow override the current arrangement, I explained, sending him the images. And he's working with someone named Richards on a contingency plan that involves these documents. Richards, Ray repeated. Timothy Richards, the attorney who was at Meridian Ventures with Andrew? I'm not sure. The journal doesn't give a full name. I'll find out. In the meantime, do you know what safe deposit box he might be referring to? Robert and I had several at different banks for various documents, I acknowledged. But all the trust originals are with Diane's firm in their secure document storage. Whatever Andrew thinks he's going to find won't change the legal reality of the current trust structure. Unless... Ray paused, clearly considering something concerning. Unless what? Unless he's not planning to use the documents legally. If he's desperate enough, he might be planning to alter documents, forge signatures, create something that appears to supersede the current trust, at least long enough to transfer funds or assets. The suggestion was shocking, but not implausible given Andrew's deteriorating mental state and the pressure from his creditors. Would that even be possible? Probably not successfully in the long run, Ray admitted. But in the short term, with the right connections and enough desperation, he might be able to create enough confusion to access some accounts, especially international ones with less stringent verification protocols. I need to alert all the banks immediately, I decided. And we should check each safe deposit box to ensure nothing has been tampered with. I'll arrange security to accompany you, Ray promised. And I'll start tracking down this Richards character. If they're planning something, we need to get ahead of it. After ending the call with Ray, I notified Diane about the journal's contents, then contacted Patricia to implement additional security measures at the firm. By midnight, we had secured all known safe deposit boxes except one, at Geneva Trust Bank, where Robert had maintained accounts since before our marriage. Their security protocols required my physical presence to access the box, which I scheduled for first thing in the morning. Sleep was impossible, my mind racing with scenarios of what Andrew might be planning and how far he might go to execute it. The journal revealed a man I barely recognized, my son transformed by grief, addiction, and delusion into someone capable of contemplating actions that would have horrified the young man who had once shared Robert's moral compass. At dawn, I checked on both children, finding them peacefully asleep, blissfully unaware of the gathering storm. Jacob's medication had stabilized his condition dramatically. The dark circles under his eyes were fading, and his breathing was deep and regular without the slight wheeze that had characterized it at Andrew's house. Emma had kicked off her covers as she always had since childhood, one arm flung dramatically over her head in unconscious grace. Looking at them, I felt a renewed determination. Whatever Andrew was planning, whatever delusions drove him, I would protect these children, not just their financial future, but their chance at healing from the trauma they had already endured. Ray was waiting in the kitchen, having arrived even earlier than planned. "We should move quickly," he advised, accepting the coffee Sandra offered. "I've confirmed that Timothy Richards was indeed Andrew's colleague at Meridian, and he's had some questionable associations since the firm collapsed, specialized in offshore structures, creative accounting methods. The perfect partner for a desperate man with access to sensitive financial information," I noted grimly. "Exactly. And there's more. Richards maintains connections with several document specialists who've been investigated for forgery in the past." Ray's expression was grave. "Whatever they're planning, it's sophisticated and potentially devastating." The drive to Geneva Trust Bank was tense, with Ray constantly scanning surrounding traffic for any sign of surveillance or threat. The bank manager was waiting when we arrived, having been alerted to the urgency of the situation. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're relieved you contacted us," he greeted me, his Swiss accent more pronounced than usual, suggesting stress. "There was an attempt to access your box yesterday afternoon." My heart sank. "By whom?" "A man claiming to be authorized on the account. He had identification in the name of Robert Mitchell." The audacity was staggering. Andrew attempting to impersonate his dead father to access the safe deposit box. "My husband passed away 2 years ago," I informed the manager, whose expression shifted to alarm. "I see. That is most concerning." The individual was turned away because he lacked the necessary additional verification, but he was quite insistent. Our security team noted his behavior as suspicious. "Do you have surveillance footage?" Ray asked. "Of course. I've prepared it for your review." The footage confirmed our worst fears. Andrew, looking surprisingly composed and professional in a suit I recognized as one of Robert's, attempting to access the box. His resemblance to his father, always notable, had been enhanced with subtle touches, silver added to his temples, similar glasses, even mimicking Robert's distinctive posture. It was a chilling performance. "We need to see what's in that box immediately," I told the manager, who promptly escorted us to the vault area. The contents of the safe deposit box were exactly as I expected. Original copies of our wills, property, deeds, and most importantly, an early draft of the trust documents, annotated in Robert's handwriting. These preliminary documents contained substantially different terms than the final version, including a clause that would have given Andrew considerably more control and earlier access to capital. This is what he was after, I realized, examining the draft. This version would have supported his claim that Robert intended him to have immediate access to the trust upon turning 40, which happened last month. "But this isn't the executed version," Ray pointed out, examining the papers. "There's no notary seal, no witness signatures." Andrew may not have known that, or he might have planned to forge the missing elements, I speculated. Either way, These documents could have created enough confusion to delay the custody proceedings or challenge the trust restructuring. I carefully gathered all the documents, signing the necessary forms to remove them permanently from the box. We need to get these to Diane immediately. As we left the bank, my phone rang. Patricia, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Eleanor, Andrew just showed up at the office with Timothy Richards and 2 men I don't recognize. They're demanding an emergency board meeting, claiming to have documents proving Andrew is the rightful CEO according to Robert's original succession plan. Stall them, I instructed. I have the documents they're looking for, and they're not what Andrew thinks. We're on our way. Ray drove directly to McAllister and Partners, calling ahead to alert building security about the situation. When we arrived, the lobby was in controlled chaos, security personnel positioned at all entrances, employees being directed to secondary exits, police officers arriving in response to a disturbance call. Gordon Wells met us at the executive elevator. Eleanor, thank God. Andrews barricaded himself in the boardroom with Richards and those other men. He's threatening to release sensitive client information to the press if we don't acknowledge him as CEO? Is anyone else in there with them? Patricia and Michael Chen were in a meeting when they burst in. They're still in there. My stomach clenched with fear for Patricia, caught in the middle of Andrew's desperate gambit. Has he made any specific demands? He wants the board to sign documents reversing the trust restructuring and acknowledging that Robert was mentally compromised when he made you trustee. Gordon's expression was grim. He's claiming to have proof that you manipulated Robert's medical care to ensure he couldn't change his mind about the succession plan. The accusation was so outrageous, so contrary to the devotion I had shown during Robert's illness, that it momentarily stole my breath. And the board's response? No one's buying it, Eleanor. We all saw how you cared for Robert. How you kept this company running while spending every night at his bedside. Gordon's usual corporate reserve cracked slightly, revealing genuine emotion. But Andrew is not rational. He's threatening to burn everything down unless his demands are met. The journal entry about fires, Ray murmured beside me. He's escalating exactly as he indicated he would. Gordon led us to a conference room that had been established as a crisis command center. Police negotiators were setting up communications, security staff were reviewing building schematics, and Diane had arrived with her legal team. The police want to handle this as a hostage situation, Diane informed me quietly. But I've advised them that Andrew is mentally unstable and potentially suicidal. A direct confrontation could be disastrous. I need to speak with him, I decided, surprising everyone in the room. Mrs. Mitchell, that's not advisable, the police negotiator interjected. In situations like this, you need someone who understands the person in crisis, I interrupted firmly. Andrew is my son. Whatever he's become, whatever he's doing, I know him better than anyone here. Eleanor, he's made threats specifically against you, Gordon cautioned. He's claiming you destroyed his relationship with Robert, that you've systematically undermined him for years. I know what he believes, I acknowledged. But I also know the sun beneath. Those delusions is still in there somewhere. Let me try. After considerable debate, the negotiator reluctantly agreed to establish phone contact, with the condition that I follow their protocols and end the call immediately if Andrew became more agitated. When the connection was established, Andrew's voice came through on speakerphone, surprisingly calm but with an underlying tension that raised the hairs on my neck. Mother, I was wondering when you'd arrive. Andrew, what are you doing? I asked simply, keeping my voice level despite the fear clutching at my throat. Reclaiming what's mine, he replied. What should have been mine all along before you poisoned? Dad against me, before you turned my children against me, before you convinced the board I was unstable. No one has turned against you, Andrew. Your father loved you. Your children love you. But your actions are frightening everyone who cares about you. Spare me the concerned mother routine, he snapped, the calm facade cracking slightly. I found the documents, Mother. The originals that prove Dad wanted me to lead the company, to control the trust when I turned 40. You kept them hidden because they exposed your manipulation. Andrew, I just came from the safe deposit box. I informed him gently. I have those documents with me right now. They're not signed or executed. They're drafts that your father revised extensively before finalizing the trust. There was a moment of silence, then a bark of disbelieving laughter. You expect me to believe that? That you just happened to check the box today? Just happened to bring the documents here? I read your journal, Andrew. I kept my voice soft, compassionate. Emma found it and brought it to me because she's frightened for you. I know about your meetings with Diaz, about working with Richards on the contingency plan, about your belief that these documents could change everything. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its aggressive confidence. Emma gave you my journal? She's trying to protect you in her way, the same way she's been trying to protect Jacob, trying to hold everything together while you've been spiraling further into addiction and debt. Don't talk about my children, he warned, but the threat sounded hollow, tinged with shame. You have no right. Andrew, please listen to me. Whatever you believe about me, about your father, about the trust, this isn't the way to resolve it. Patricia and Michael have nothing to do with any of this. Let them go, and we can talk. Just you and me. It's too late for talks, he replied, though I detected a waver in his certainty. Richards has already initiated transfers from the offshore accounts. By this time tomorrow, I'll have enough to pay off Diaz and start over somewhere else. Ray immediately began typing on his tablet, presumably alerting financial security teams to freeze the accounts Andrew had mentioned. With what? I asked gently. Your reputation in ruins, charges of hostage-taking and corporate espionage hanging over you, separated from your children who need you? Is that really the fresh start you want, Andrew? You left me no choice. His voice rose in frustrated anguish. You took everything. My inheritance, my position, my children. No, Andrew. Your gambling took your inheritance. Your abandonment of your responsibilities cost you your position. Your neglect endangered your children. I paused, softening my tone. But none of that is irreversible. Not yet. There's still a path back if you're willing to take it. What path? His voice had dropped to almost a whisper, the bravado crumbling under the weight of reality. The trust is gone. My career is over. My own daughter betrayed me. The path of healing, I told him simply, of accepting help for your addiction, of rebuilding relationships with your children, of finding purpose beyond the money and position you've been fixated on. It's too late, he repeated, but with less conviction. Diaz won't wait for me to complete some 12-step program. He wants his money now. We can handle Diaz, I assured him, catching Ray's affirmative nod, confirming. This was possible. But first, I need you to let Patricia and Michael go. I need you to show your children that when it really matters, their father makes the right choice. The silence that followed seemed eternal, broken only by the sound of Andrew's uneven breathing. Finally he spoke, his voice that of a lost child, rather than an angry man. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. The simple admission, the return to mom, rather than the formal mother he'd been using since Robert's death, broke something open inside me. Grief and hope mingling in an overwhelming wave. Start by opening the door, Andrew, I said gently. One step at a time. 3 agonizing minutes later, the boardroom door opened. Patricia and Michael emerged first, shaken but unharmed. Behind them came Timothy Richards, ashen-faced and already beginning what sounded like an attorney's careful distancing from criminal activity. The 2 unknown men followed, security personnel immediately separating them from the group. And finally, Andrew, my son, Robert's legacy, father to the 2 children who deserved better than what the past 2 years had given them. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the collapse of his delusions, the expensive suit that had been his disguise at the bank now rumpled and sad. When he saw me, something in his expression cracked entirely. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Two simple words containing worlds of meaning as police officers carefully took him into custody. I moved forward instinctively, maternal instinct overriding caution. "I'll be there at the arraignment," I promised him. "This isn't the end, Andrew. It's the beginning of a different path." The aftermath unfolded with the efficiency of well-prepared contingency plans. Andrew was charged but released to a high-security rehabilitation facility, the judge swayed by the combination of my advocacy and Diane's skillful legal maneuvering. The offshore accounts Richards had attempted to access were secured before any significant funds could be transferred. Victor Diaz, facing scrutiny from authorities tipped off by Ray's connections, suddenly became amenable to a structured repayment plan with very official oversight. 2 months later, I sat in the family courtroom once again, this time for a hearing to determine next steps in the custody arrangement. Andrew, attending from the rehabilitation center, looked markedly different. Clear-eyed, humbled, the physical manifestation of addiction receding with proper treatment. While I acknowledge Mr. Mitchell's progress in rehabilitation, Judge Harriman noted, reviewing the reports before her, 2 months of sobriety and therapy, though commendable, do not erase the concerning behaviors that precipitated this case. "I understand, Your Honor," Andrew responded, his voice steady. "I'm not asking for immediate restoration of custody. I'm simply requesting the opportunity to rebuild my relationship with my children through supervised visitation as I continue treatment." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, as the current custodial guardian, what is your position on this request?" I met Andrew's gaze across the courtroom, seeing in his eyes not the entitled anger that had driven his destructive spiral, but something closer to the son I remembered, uncertainty, hope, and a fragile determination to rebuild what he had nearly destroyed. "I support a structured visitation plan, Your Honor," I stated clearly, "while maintaining primary custody with me until Andrew completes his treatment program and establishes a sustainable recovery." She nodded, making notes. "And the children's preferences have been recorded by the court evaluator. Both express caution but willingness to reconnect with their father under appropriate circumstances." The hearing concluded with a compromise that acknowledged both Andrew's progress and the damage that needed healing, regular supervised visits, family therapy sessions, and a reassessment in 6 months regarding the potential for shared custody, if recovery milestones were met. As we left the courtroom, Andrew approached me hesitantly. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on me, for protecting them when I couldn't." "They're extraordinary children," I told him. "They get that. Resilience from both their parents." A small smile, genuine if tentative, crossed his face. "And their grandparents." That evening, I sat with Emma and Jacob in the garden that had once been Robert's pride, explaining the court's decision and preparing them for their first structured visit with Andrew the following weekend. "Will he be different?" Jacob asked, anxiety evident in his fidgeting hands. "Yes and no," I answered honestly. "The father you remember is still there, but he's working through some very difficult issues. Recovery is a process, not an event." "Mom always said that," Emma noted quietly. "About her cancer treatments, that healing wasn't linear." "She was very wise," I agreed, thinking of my daughter-in-law who had faced her illness with such grace, who would have been heartbroken to see what had become of her family after her death. "And she would be so proud of both of you for your courage through all of this." "Are you and Dad ever going to be okay again?" Emma asked, the question revealing her lingering hope for family reconciliation despite everything she had witnessed. "We're finding a new version of okay," I told her, not wanting to offer false promises. "Something different than before, but hopefully something that can still provide what you both need." Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, I returned to Robert's study, the room that had become my sanctuary and command center through the turbulence of the past months. The trust documents lay on the desk, the restructuring that had triggered Andrew's spiral now serving as the framework for a potential path forward. Robert had built safeguards into the trust to protect the family from precisely the kind of crisis we had weathered, but he had also built redemption clauses, provisions allowing for rehabilitation, for second chances, for the possibility that people could change course even after significant failure. "You saw it all coming, didn't you?" I murmured to his photograph. The potential for destruction and the potential for healing. There was no answer, of course, but as I reviewed the rehabilitation provisions, I could almost hear his practical optimism in the carefully crafted clauses, his belief that structure could provide safety while still allowing for growth and change. The path ahead would not be easy. Andrew's recovery would face setbacks. The children would struggle with trust issues born from trauma. The family dynamics would need to be rebuilt almost from scratch. But for the first time since Robert's death, I could see a way forward that didn't require me to choose between being Andrew's mother and being his children's protector. The trust fund that had become the catalyst for so much conflict could now serve its intended purpose, providing security for future generations while encouraging responsibility and growth in the present, not as a weapon or a bargaining chip, but as the legacy Robert had always intended it to be. Outside, the garden lights illuminated the pathway Robert had designed, leading from the house to the small pond where we had often sat in the evenings, planning our future and later watching our son play. In the morning, I would walk that path with Jacob and Emma, telling them stories about their grandfather that Andrew had been too lost in grief to share. For now, though, I closed the trust documents and turned off the study lights, leaving Robert's legacy secure but evolving, protected but not frozen in time. The control I had been forced to exercise would gradually shift as balance was restored. Not abandoned, but shared with those who proved worthy of the responsibility. "We'll be okay," I promised the quiet room, and everyone it represented. Robert's memory, Andrew's struggling recovery, Emma and Jacob's tentative hope, and my own hard-won wisdom. Different than before, but okay. And for the first time in 2 years, I believed it might actually be true. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.